The truth about you must be really potent if others must lie about you in order to be liked. Keep that in mind because this is the shocking, icy reality. Over 65% of people acknowledge that they have believed a rumor about someone before ever meeting them. However, you enter a room and dispel every misconception. They believe their falsehoods would last forever. They believe that your legacy would consist of their falsehoods. The joke is on them, though. You're still getting up. Everyone is now seeing the liars as they perspire. This goes beyond mere rumors. This is the result of divine vengeance. They shaped their perception of you to reflect their own anxieties. The frightening thing is that you ended up becoming the complete opposite. Furthermore, they could never have imagined the beauty, strength, and unwavering nature of the truth. Hold on tight, because we're going to remove every false label they've attempted to apply to you in this video. We are going to reveal the grand spiritual plot of change, in which the virtuous are drowned in their own masks and the evil is redeemed. People aren't nervous because they can see through the smoke, if that's what you're thinking. They're in a panic. Let's get started. First, they used their own vile reflections to define you for years. They used their own decaying reflections to define you for years. They didn't notice you when they glanced at you. What they were attempting to conceal within themselves was revealed to them, and they painted it over in your name rather than fixing it. None of the harsh accusations, derogatory names, and false tales they told you were true. They displayed these traits on your face: their spiritual degradation, their shame, and their jealousy. Such people are not grounded in reality. They project their actions. You brought to their attention the aspects of themselves they had buried and wished no one to see. They felt phony because of your generosity. They were reminded of their true weakness by your power. Their games were interrupted by your candor. And they behaved like cowards because they were unable to cope with that reflection. They attempted to paint you as a monster and placed the responsibility on you. They said that you were unstable, dangerous, and unreliable. They were worried that people who knew who you really were would adore you, not because you are. Because of their own suffering, they hastily constructed a version of you. It was a race against your wisdom, against your recovery, against the coming of the truth. They slandered you beforehand, like criminals concealing evidence. You can help spread God's blessings by clicking the Super Thanks button on YouTube and contributing $20 or more. Your entire presence revealed their falsehoods, which is the true reason they never stopped talking about you. There was nothing you had to do. It was enough to upset them simply by being you. The unfortunate thing is that for a while, some people did believe them, because people mistake emotional deception for sincerity when it occurs. However, time has a peculiar way of revealing the truth. Peace, progress, and consistency. Everything begins to speak for itself. The same individuals who believe the falsehood are now beginning to feel ill, because the flavor of truth is distinct. You never were who they said you were. For those who were unable to confront their own shadows, you were just the most convenient target. They required an antagonist. You possessed a radiance that they couldn't explain, which made you the most vulnerable prey. However, people are beginning to notice now. They come to the realization that the person they were warned about was the one who genuinely needed protection, and that the bad guy tale was a reflection all along. Second, they didn't feel holy about your existence, so they had to vilify you. Your presence didn't feel sacred to them, so they had to malign you. By just being yourself, you were able to infiltrate their lives without revealing anything. You had such a genuine, honest, and pure soul. Additionally, those who are accustomed to putting on a show, behaving behind closed doors, and engaging in filthy games will not put up with someone who doesn't wear a mask. Something within of them was sparked by you. You didn't attempt to be like them, not because you wanted to be better than them. You didn't spread rumors. You didn't try to win them over. Being visible wasn't your obsession. Ironically, though, you were spotted by everyone. They were troubled by it alone. Your calm disposition. The noise is revealed by your stillness. Despite all that happened to you, you maintained your composure. They were troubled by that because it made them examine themselves. You were more than simply a person to them. You served as a reminder of everything they were not, everything they concealed, and the integrity they sacrificed in order to fit in with a group of people who would never truly love them. They decided to take the easy route rather than make a change. They concluded that the issue was you. Admitting you were genuine was more difficult than claiming you were a phony. Labeling you as evil was simpler than confronting their own malice. Calling you theatrical was simpler than acknowledging that you were indifferent to sorrow. You weren't too theatrical. The truth you carried was too insensitive for them to sense. Your generosity is shadowed by them. They thought you were being conceited by your silence. They presented your pride as your strength. They understood what they were doing, though, deep inside. It was never about your identity. It has to do with what your soul evoked in them. They could have requested you to demonstrate healing for them. However, pride prevents shattered individuals from seeking assistance. Instead, in order to feel more justified, they constructed a false picture of you. The worst thing is that some of them even persuaded themselves that you were who they claimed you were. But no matter how many falsehoods they speak, nothing has changed. Thus, the truth is now coming out. You still have a strong character. Even people who formerly questioned you now realize that you were not the target of their anger. It was because of the aspects of themselves that they found intolerable. Thirdly, they said that you were too much since you wouldn't lower yourself to suit their needs. They were always telling you that you were too loud, too passionate, too deep, too intense, or too much. In actuality, though, you weren't too much. For some whose whole identity revolved around acting, you were too genuine. You upended everything when you revealed who you really were. This wasn't because you were crazy. Rather, it was because most people were accustomed to lowering their standards in order to fit in. That's not what you did. They felt uneasy since you didn't minimize yourself. They were unprepared for someone who was powerful without a filter and who spoke the truth without waiting for approval. You didn't minimize yourself for the comfort of others, and it was sufficient to categorize you as challenging. However, to them, being tough just meant that you were uncontrollable. You had a vision, standards, and boundaries. You were threatening because you asked a question rather than just following the herd. Those used to phony calm and superficial dialogue are clueless about how to act around someone who adds genuine substance. You were too honest, too unvarnished, and too real for them. They attempted to guilt you into it rather than acknowledge that they weren't prepared for that level of presence. They made an effort to quiet you, reduce your volume, and soothe you. But you being too much has nothing to do with this. Their shortcomings in critical areas were the main cause of it. The fact that you felt no remorse was what really shocked them. You didn't allow them to try to control you, but you also didn't play the victim. They began insulting you, labeling you theatrical, troublesome, and excessive when they were unable to shape you into their ideal of you. However, they were not accurate descriptions. They were frantic attempts to manage your existence and their own fears. People began to realize this over time. They understood that you weren't the issue. You were the first to break the mold and quit performing a part. Because they know the truth in their hearts. Many who think you are too much now secretly wish they had half your guts. You weren't excessive. Simply put, you were too genuine to be managed. Fourth, they sacrificed your reputation to their deity of control. To preserve their own reputation, they sacrificed your name. They sacrificed your reputation in order to keep the appearance of control. They knew that no one would pay them too much attention as long as they were concentrating on you. Thus, they presented falsehoods to the public as if they were unquestionable facts. People, regrettably, accepted them without question. What you did had nothing to do with it. How they wanted you to look was what counted. In order for them to be the victims in their tale, you had to be the antagonist. They made half-truths into whole stories, inflated feelings, and misrepresented occurrences. Every rumor served as a ritual to maintain their self-esteem. Being correct was not their only goal. They desired to be revered. They wanted their escape from the devastation they caused to be praised. They used your name as a scapegoat. Like proof of your guilt, they weighed their insecurities, humiliation, and guilt on you. Additionally, their obsession with controlling how you were viewed grew as they lost control over their own life. They were anxious and amplified their falsehoods. They used warnings to cover up their envy. They concealed their attractiveness and ruthlessness. They ensured that your reality was hidden behind the cacophony while all of this was going on. This is the unexpected part, though. The truth endures forever. It might not say anything for a long time. You can bury it. You can even make fun of it. But it always returns. There is a formula for the resuscitation of the truth. The same individuals who first accepted the falsehoods are now beginning to doubt everything. Their performance is beginning to reveal flaws. They are sitting on a shaky faux throne, and you're getting up. You don't need retribution to rise. You have nothing to prove, yet you are rising. You may disprove them by just strolling in peace and acting consistently. The same group of people who followed you are now seeing something else. The strength that comes from all they attempted to destroy inside you, your clarity and your brilliance. They undervalued your spirit, but they sacrificed your reputation. Fifth, you weren't destroyed by them. They unintentionally orchestrated your ascent. They believed they could actually shatter you. They felt that humiliation, treachery, and pressure would break you for good. That was the objective, to make you bend in humiliation and to silence you. See, we told you they were unstable. They said as they watched you fall, but they failed to account for one thing. You remained intact. You constructed. They believed that suffering would ruin you. However, you transformed every setback into a tactic, every defeat into insight, and every rejection into a shift in course. You made bricks out of everything they used to bury you. You built your foundation by piling everything they threw at you on top of one another. You didn't just make it through the storm. You researched it. You became aware of its patterns. You discovered who was genuine, who wasn't, and who gave you a backstab while grinning. And you acquired a sharp mind in place of suffering. You learned to breathe underwater, even though they believed you would drown in the turmoil. They were unaware that some people do well under duress. One of them was you. You were silently ascending with a stronger name while they were actively ruining yours. Your mission became more apparent as a result of all they attempted to shatter your spirit. You didn't break down. You changed. They were perplexed by your progress. After all of this, how are you still so happy? After being struck by so many buses, how are you able to remain upright? They don't realize that some people don't find strength in praise or recognition. Their cause gives them power. You can help spread God's blessings by clicking the Super Thanks button on YouTube and contributing $20 or more. Furthermore, under pressure, purpose does not falter. In stillness, it grows. They unintentionally handed you that. An ideal setting for being unstoppable. You didn't just leave the fire. You managed to escape the fire unscathed. Those who mocked your suffering are now attempting to comprehend your effort. They unintentionally contributed to the next chapter of your narrative, even though they believed they had concluded it. And now is the chapter in which you step in, as the person they never thought you could be, not as the bad guy or the victim. You were brought to light by the storm, not destroyed by it. Sixth, they developed a made-up antagonist, and the world understood that you were never like this. To defend their treatment of you, they need a villain. So they made one. They weren't only lying about you. You portrayed the distressed character in a well-written narrative. They exaggerated your shortcomings, misrepresented what you said, and filled in the blanks with their own dreams and anxieties. And people believed them because they were emotionally persuasive. Although it appeared genuine, it wasn't. It was a theater. The tale ultimately collapsed, as is the case with many poorly written scripts. It worked at first. People choose a side. Whatever character suited their tale that day, they painted you as unstable, theatrical, self-centered, or conceited. They tried their hardest to love and support you. They were the victims. How about you? It was you who broke their tranquility, a whirlwind of irrational emotions. They made subtle digs, wept crocodile tears, and spoke passive-aggressive things loud enough to ruin your reputation. However, this game was short-lived, because you were living your life, and they were busy making up stories. You didn't participate and you didn't take revenge. You were grounded, calm, and reliable. And it was ultimately what broke the illusion. You didn't look like the creature they were describing. You didn't contain any poison. You were not in a state of turmoil. Individuals began observing you for themselves. They started to doubt the information they were being given. At that point, everything began to reveal itself. The same people who had made snap judgments about you now started to watch you. They were increasingly aware that this individual was not who they had been informed as they continued to observe. You didn't react, you were composed. You weren't harsh, you were honest. You were not in agony, you had boundaries. The weight of your truth caused the falsehoods to start to fall apart. The mask is now coming off, but not because of you. They are to blame for it falling. The true manipulator who stoked the drama and played the victim while causing suffering is now coming to light. They weren't justified by your silence. It allowed time for the truth to catch up. The villain they meticulously created has disappeared, leaving only their own reflections to stare back at them. And now that the truth has come to light, they are in a panic. Seventh, since it was the only time they felt strong enough to oppose you, they laughed at your suffering. When you were at your lowest, they laughed. As you attempted to get through the moments that almost broke your soul, they sneered, murmured, and made fun of you. They found amusement in your suffering. It was evident from your cries that they had finally defeated you. It was their sole feeling of strength, the time when it felt like you were at your very end. They saw your quiet as surrender and your suffering as defeat. They believed they had triumphed. However, they were unable to see what was underneath the surface. Your suffering wasn't over. That was when your metamorphosis started. That loss, that heartache, and that profound spiritual breakdown weren't signs of weakness. It was holy. It was a form of sanctification. In the background, something beautiful was taking place. Your suffering was removing from your life all of the phony personas, poisonous links, and fleeting relationships. This wasn't devastation. It was cleansing. They never explored their inner depths. Therefore, they were unable to comprehend this. They never sat in their own misery without manipulating or staging it. However, you remained. You didn't manipulate anyone with your suffering. You didn't shatter because you let your suffering break you. People are afraid of this type of growth because they know that you will never be the same again and that they will never be able to reach you again after going through something like that. They celebrated when you broke because of this. That was their sole feeling of superiority. They were reminded of their own fears by your vulnerability. Therefore, they made fun of you for experiencing it rather than confronting it. They're shocked, though, since they thought you would stay damaged, resentful, or at most mute. Rather, you've grown more astute, kind, and observant. You remain powerful. You improved it. They witnessed your agony from the front row, but they were not present when you recovered. They're at a loss for what to do now that you've come out calmer, clearer, and more at peace. In reality, your rebirth was the anguish they ridiculed. Your miraculous realignment appeared to be a collapse. You weren't disintegrating. You were becoming comfortable. They are unable to stop it today, just as they were unable to stop it back then. Eighth, they failed miserably in front of witnesses, and you were a test. You were never picked at random. You were a test for them, not for yourself. You brought light, tranquility, honesty, and pure aim into their lives. And despite all of their charm and presentation, the way they handled you showed you who they really are. You didn't come seeking attention or allegiance. You were just who you really were. But that was enough to reveal their shortcomings. You activated the aspects of them that they had repressed. Your soul shattered the carefully constructed picture they had constructed for themselves, not because you did anything wrong. God never stopped watching you. The spiritual world was keeping a careful eye on everything. Every action they took was documented by both the spiritual and human realms, even as they waged smear campaigns and pretended to be innocent. You weren't only used as a fall guy. You served as a walking checkpoint, a mirror, and a heavenly test that showed their heart's actual condition. And they caved in as the pressure increased. They were dishonest. They were treacherous. They engaged in gossip. They opted for brutality over empathy and manipulation over maturity. And they bravely did this in front of onlookers. They believed their skins were preserved. They believed they could hurl stones behind the scenes while playing the victim. However, the test covered more ground than their personal activities. It was about what people would see in the end. Because even those who used to believe in them are starting to change their minds. Because of your progress, constancy, and composure, the truth is coming to light. People are starting to understand that you've survived the fire. Despite being put to the test in every manner, you have maintained your integrity. However, they toyed with matches in a risky, careless, and haughty manner, believing that the fire would never reach them. But they were hit by the flames. We are exposing their falsehoods. Their delusion of innocence is eroding. And while those who tried to bury you are busy defending themselves, those who supported you while you were down are now following your resolute steps. This was never only a time of treachery. The revelation of who is genuine and who was never suited to walk with you from the start was a heavenly arrangement. You were put to the test, and now everyone can see who has utterly failed. They made fun of what they didn't comprehend in number 9, and now they are afraid of what they can't explain. They couldn't comprehend you, so they made fun of you. You didn't conform to their expectations. You disregarded their regulations. They were upset because you didn't act how they expected you to. People are afraid of things they can't control. They made fun of you rather than pondering your depth. You were too composed, too perceptive, and too unique. They ridiculed you rather than attempting to comprehend you. They made fun of your silent power. They said you were too sensitive. They dismissed your instincts as foolish. But they were uncomfortable in their hearts. not because of what you did, but because of the manner you behaved, which they were unable to explain. They were startled that you weren't playing a part. To feel strong, you didn't need a crowd. You weren't trying to win them over. You didn't exude confidence. It had deep roots. You were raised in quiet. In your personal life, you found healing. You progressed without seeking approval. That's when they started to get scared. Since you are no longer a person they may categorize, they can no longer make fun of you or feel superior to you. They are no longer able to contact you. Their stagnation was revealed by your progress. Their indolence was exposed by your development. They are now uneasy with themselves as much as with you, since your calm revealed their drama to be juvenile. They witnessed the events that ought to have destroyed you. They witnessed your losses, betrayals, and trying times, yet you still arose stronger, wiser, and pain-free. People who depend on performance and manipulation to advance are alarmed by this type of increase. They wanted you to remain in a position where they could make fun of you without fear. The joke is finished, though, for you have now surpassed them in skill. Fear is the only thing remaining. Thus, they are unable to undo your development. They are unable to duplicate your procedure. Without admitting the aspect of you they attempted to destroy, they are unable to explain how you got to this position. You can help spread God's blessings by clicking the Super Thanks button on YouTube and contributing $20 or more. They particularly find it hard to believe that goodness follows you. You are a live example that virtue is not derived from dishonest actions. Praise and strategy are not the source of goodness. Harmony is the source of it. They also failed to see it. You were made fun of, misinterpreted, and denigrated, and now you are unstoppable. And people who used to make fun of you are now silently observing you, unable to understand how you turned into the person they said they would never be. 10. What God has etched into your destiny cannot be undone by them. They made every effort to destroy you. They ostracized you and removed your name from discussions. They pretended that you didn't exist. The blessings they were powerless to manage were blocked. To make it appear as though they were the sole cause of everything, they altered tales. Because the fact that you were here was beginning to show how little they really contributed. However, they overlooked the fact that your mission cannot be taken away, not via apathy, rumors, or purposeful quiet. You never took advantage of opportunities. The opportunity itself was you. They could never own you, but you carried peace, ideas, answers, and your entire being. And they chose to eliminate you since they were unable to control you. They could mentally mute you and prevent your name from being mentioned, and they wouldn't recall how much more they needed you than they acknowledged. However, it failed because human hands are incapable of erasing what God has sculpted. You can't stop the trend of purpose. You can't remove the ink. You can't remove that name from a group chat. Your value is not determined by who talks about you, and your future is not dependent on their acceptance. Long before they had the opportunity to write your tale, you were etched into your spirit. And now that you're living that reality, they understand that excluding you won't stop you from rising. Actually, without uttering a single word, your voice is growing louder. Your existence, your tranquility, and your life all say volumes today. Nothing needs to be explained, argued, or proven. People pay attention. Change is evident. Those who attempted to keep you out are observing from a distance as everything they claimed you were incapable of doing materializes. They saw your quiet as a sign of failure. It was only preparation, though, and now, without you even knocking, every door that they shut in your face is opening. Because once your name is inscribed by God, it cannot be removed. Nor out of envy, nor out of fear, not out of manipulation. You weren't wiped out. You were moved. Ironically, your spirit was never weak enough to be destroyed. Number 11. They shouted falsehoods, but today the truth comes naturally. They needed noise to hide the reality, so they spoke loud falsehoods. They want rapid dissemination of their version. They conveyed it with emotion, intensity, and just enough drama to make people pay attention. Whether it was true or not didn't matter to them. All they wanted was the first voice and the loudest voice. They believed that if they spoke with enough assurance, no one would doubt them. They were correct for a time. They heard, they believed, they made judgments. However, falsehoods don't last long. With time, they start to decay. They start to contradict themselves. They begin to smell. At that point, the truth is revealed. Not with disarray, not with disputes, but with regularity. A stage is not necessary for the truth. There is no need for applause. It doesn't have to yell. All it takes is time. Time has now spoken. You didn't cheer. You didn't participate in their game. You didn't go after others to defend yourself.